Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did get it right, but as we're looking at original intent, once again, and looking back into the history of those conventions that were happening within the states and deriving then our original intent from what happened during that whole period of ratifying the Constitution. I'm delighted today to have with us Major General Paul Vallely, and it's just a delight and an honor to have you with us, General. We're just excited that you'll be part of the program. And how you doing this week?
Well, fine, and thank you for your kind invitation. Very happy to join you.
Well, thank you. The honor is all ours. And, you know, as we look at the general's background is stellar in all that he has accomplished over time. And General, just why don't you give us a couple minute background yourself, better than me reading your bio. It's always nice to hear directly from my guest as to a little bit who they are, and you're well known across the country.
Well, I'll try to capsule 36 years if I can. Anyhow, I left a small town in Pennsylvania north of Pittsburgh, went to West Point at 17 years old, graduated from the U.S. Military Academy in 1961, went to infantry basic course, airborne course, ranger school, and then I was positioned on my first assignment with the 82nd Airborne, 505th Airborne Battle Group in Mainz, Germany. Yeah. And so I was there at the height of the Cold War in the early 60s, and we were the reinforcements for Berlin, by the way, at that time. Mm-hmm. Came back, went to Vietnam with the 1st Infantry Division, became an aide to the field commander in Vietnam, and then took over a rifle company in the 101st Airborne, came back to the Advanced Course Infantry, back over to Vietnam as an advisor. And then, of course, my last 20 years have been in special operations, mm-hmm. Mostly training and working with other countries in counterterrorism, anti-drug operations. Yeah. And so I retired as Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army Pacific in early 1992, and retired for a while. And then I became, after 9/11, I was hired by Roger Ailes to be the first military strategist for Fox News, and I was with Fox News for 8 years. Now, for the last 15 years, since 2005, General Tom McInerney and I founded the Stand Up America U.S. Foundation, yes, of which now I continue to be the chairman of that, and we do a lot of studies, particularly we focus on national security. So I'm doing probably about 4 or 5 radio, TV interviews a week now out of my place in Montana. So it keeps me, at a young 81 years old, it keeps me alive and keeps my mind working. So there we are.
Yeah, well, you know, that's wonderful. I really appreciate that. Just as a side note, my dad's turning 93. And so he was in the 101st during that first part of Korea, but he never finished everything, including jump school. And so when he turned 89, I actually took him jumping and took him out to do some tandems, because when they, as you well know, they took a lot of guys out of those types of units, and he ended up in the 2nd Infantry over in Korea. So he had some interesting times based on that transition and his background. So, but I always had a great affinity to airborne, and being a simple sailor as I was, I did have privileges of making it out the tail end of a bunch of stuff myself. So that was all fun. But with that and what you're doing, a lot of people, as we were talking before the program got started and looking at the topic, when I went in, it was during those Zumwalt years. And we were seeing a lot of the transition and cultural changes that were happening at that period of time as well. But now what we're seeing is just the major shifts in military culture, but also philosophy, not just philosophy on how we handle warfare, But when it comes to how we're taking and doing, I would look at it as a social cultural experimentation that's first being implemented within our military. And what's happened in your perspective as we saw that transition out of the Obama years and some of that which was occurring then? We saw a reset during the Trump years, but now it seems even more flagrant than any time that I've looked at what was happening in the military. Could you give us some of your
Sure.
initial thoughts on that?
Well, if you track back a little bit, you go back to after Vietnam,
Hmm.
Jimmy Carter, the armed forces went way downhill. Morale,
Yes.
readiness, recruiting, status of our equipment, and so on. And when President Reagan was elected, then that was built back up again,
Yes.
and it stayed very strong all through the years until the Clintons, when they really started to politicize the general officers and the admirals, because the Clintons really never felt comfortable around the military. So a guy by the name of Gerald West Clark was the first general that we, West Point graduate as well. It became very politicized. Later ran for president, as you may remember.
Hmm.
But
Yes.
under Obama, he purged some 120 senior officers that
Yes.
weren't following the social engineering that Obama laid on the military at that time, getting away from readiness. The condition of our equipment went way downhill. Of course, we had been operating in the Middle East for quite a while at that time, and so there was a reason for it. But there was never any focus by Obama to build a strong force that was ready to take on whatever national threats we have. And then, of course, President Trump came in, built it back up again, and now we see a degradation of the armed forces again, but with a whole new umbrella now. What we may call the grand social engineering, the wokeism. And
Right.
we see the embarrassment of these four-star generals and admirals now. If you saw General Milley and his testimony, and Admiral Gilday, I think his name is,
Yes.
Chief of Naval Officer, what an embarrassment. I mean, I was trained by the generals from World War II.
Hmm.
And when I graduated from West Point, it was duty, honor, country. A cadet at that time, it was our motto: we don't lie, cheat, or steal. But now I look at they're spreading this wokeism, critical race theory into the ranks, down to the military academies.
Yes.
And they've even hired a racist by the name of Bishop to work for the Secretary of Defense. And Gordon Austin, the Secretary of Defense, also a West Point graduate. Basically, he does what he's told. So he's being told by Obama, who actually is running the White House, by the way, in case you don't
Yes.
know that. He does that through Susan Rice, who's positioned at a desk in the executive office building. Everything goes through Susan Rice, from Obama to Susan Rice to the mouthpiece, a president by the name of Biden. And of course, then you have the vice president. She doesn't have a clue where she's at. So that's why Obama's got tight control in there, but he's losing it. They're losing it big time. But
Yeah.
anyhow, no, it's a shame that we see our military, especially when we look at the threats of China today. China continues to expand its power over the globe, economically, financially, militarily, through the South China Sea, taking over islands over there, threatening Taiwan now. And then the second major threat that a lot of people external don't realize are the cartels.
Yes.
5 to 6 cartels in the Sinaloa area responsible for killing more Americans than we've lost in the Middle East.
Yes.
Through
Yes.
drugs, through the gangs they support, and now the mass illegal border crossings that are going on.
And
So
I know
from
that
that standpoint, those are the external threats, and I'll leave it to go back
yeah.
if you want to ask the next question.
I know our mutual friend John Trudell that you were a great help in consulting with him on his book, and I know that there were some things that where I contributed from some of the activities I was involved in Venezuela. And so when we look at exactly what you're talking about, what's happening with the cartels, where it filters from, and the other nefarious government entities that are participating in that. in the various scales, and people don't have a real understanding of that. But then, as we look within these last 5 minutes here in this first segment, we're trying to look at what happened to those same general officers, maybe slightly younger than yourself, but yet the idea that they would become politicized. What was some of the key elements within the next couple of minutes here that really captured them to bring them to the point now that they become more puppeteers in what I call the Biden administration, that instead of taking and having, God and country, duty and honor as to that which you and I mutually served with.
Well, and this actually goes back a couple decades now. The academies, the Naval Academy, West Point, started bringing in these liberal Northeast professors in on the faculty. Yeah. And so they started to expand the social studies at the academies versus the studying, which basically you're an engineer. Get an engineering degree at West Point because it's mostly physical sciences, math, physics, chemistry, and so on and so forth. But and then a lot of time allocated to military training, military strategy, studying the great wars of the past, great leaders, and that started to shift in the 80s a bit. And of course, it's even been exaggerated now, where they've expanded that social engineering down to the academy. So very young, some of these officers got in their minds all this social stuff, and you see what we have today, that they bought off on it. And again, it's a disgrace to the uniform as far as I'm concerned. So it's embellished. But then we have Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer, U.S. Air Force, that stood up and wrote a book, and that's what we need. And now, of course, they're trying to jam all these vaccines onto the troops. Troops, many of them rebelling that they don't want the vaccines.
Correct.
And so it's been forced, just like they had to do with the anthrax testing that they did years ago on the military. So things are not good. Things are not good in the ranks right now. Yeah. And guess what? Our adversaries see it.
Yes. Oh, and they're delighted with it.
They're delighted with it because as we weaken our forces, because right now the pivotal threat is against Taiwan. And we know the Chinese are threatening that. And the question is, what will Biden do in case? We know Japan has come up and they'll stand by Taiwan. I think the South Koreans will. There's a new alliance out there with India, with Australia, and the Thais. But the Vietnamese don't like the Chinese. The Chinese only have one friend, and that's North Korea. They have no other friends out there.
That's all they have.
But anyhow, my whole thing with the Pentagon is I want to know what the plans are to take down the cartels. Do you have one? The answer is going to be no. They don't have a plan for taking down the cartels, a threat to the United States. Absolutely not. And
that's going to come down to, once again, if I may interrupt you, and we'll pick it up in the second segment as well. We're down to our last minute. But that's been the travesty of the drug war, as you well know, having been involved with that. And for the many, many years, is that we, number one, in not securing the border as we were initially trying to do, and making great efforts in there, and applying the various forces within that of all the agencies that want to actually do the right thing. Now we're really in that quandary. And those are some of the things that, from a historical perspective, when we look back to what it was that we applied from that initial military history, and we can touch on that a little bit in the next segment also, because the founders always were intending to have that security of the nation. That's why it's in the duty of the federal government established within the Constitution to protect us from invasion. And what we have going on right now is the cartels are with utilizing these floods of people invading this nation. Sam Adams clearly understood that. as well as did the other founders, the anti-federalists, and they established a mechanism constitutionally for us to stand strong against that.
Yeah.
So we're going to invite folks to come back in the next segment as we continue our time together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists got it right, and we're moving through a great time with General Vallely. And what's really important, folks, is that you take a look at what happens here on Liberty Works Radio Network. This is a listener-funded network, as you well know, and you hear me say all the time during this segment. And the most important thing that you can do at this time is to go look at all the other hosts and hostesses that are available, and please find that donate button. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that with the Major General and his efforts and what he's doing, because it's critical that we do that. We support our patriot friends in every manner that we possibly can. And with that, General, please, let's pick up on what we were talking from that historical perspective. And you had something you wanted to add as I finished up from that, closing out the first segment.
Well, first of all, our website is standupamericaus.org, standupamericaus.org. We've done 22 different study analysis on the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese. We've done 8 on what's happening in Canada. A lot of people don't realize how bad it is up north of the border here. But what I wanted to interject as a carryover, the foundation developed a operational plan to neutralize the cartels. We sent that to Trump in 2017. And also our foundation, which you may not know, we gave Trump his national theme, America First.
There you go.
America First papers in 2014. We sent 2 to the president during the primary, Paths to Glory, from the Revolutionary War Day.
Yes.
America First. So not bragging, but I think just wanted to highlight that because a lot of people went in to make that happen.
Well, appreciate that.
But anyhow, we can't play defense anymore.
No.
Even when under Trump, it was a defensive plan, putting the guard down there, building the barriers, building the wall, but now it's gotten to the point where it's so dangerous and such a threat to America that we have to go on the offense. So we put together a clandestine covert plan, basically, which would include intelligence, air, predators, working with the Mexican Marines and their special forces, but it would be a special operation that would be covertly. And that plan, we can take the cartels down in 7 days.
Yes.
7 days.
Yeah, without question. I mean, we have the capacity to do that. And it's all a matter of effectively putting it into action and having someone with the intestinal fortitude to carry it out. And that becomes, is there the political will? And we know within the Biden administration that that is not there. They're culpable in everything that is taking in, impacting the nation in such a negative manner. And it becomes extremely interesting to then take and try and, when we look at the special forces, this is the first time when I saw that they put a CRT specialist, if you will, into special forces now. I mean, that is really going to the yes. I thank you for that physical expression of that, because I mean, all my friends that I know in the community, they're sitting there just shaking their heads and going, "What are we thinking?" I mean, comment on that, because you just set a plan that we can go in there and within that short parameter of time take down these, disgusting, murderous, destroying groups, and yet now we're taking in, we're trying to disable them from an emotional, socialistic, cultural perspective. I mean, it blows my mind when I saw that.
Well, the intel I'm able to get out of the it's a tri area down there. We have 3 provinces basically where the cartels operate out of. But they're totally militarized now. They have better weapons they bought in the marketplace than the Mexican army has. They have drones. They have mechanized vehicles. they have rockets, they have all sorts of things. They are a military force. That's why the Pentagon has got to take this on as an offensive operation. Exactly.
Agreed. And it has to come back down to one of the things just prior to getting on the line with you is that I lecture on the Constitution twice a week at this time. So I had a class, earlier today, as well as I'll have one again tomorrow. But in trying to get people to understand that that's a real critical element. That although the military may have a sense of it, when we have leaders that are still within that understand what the Constitution really says, especially from an invasion perspective. But once again, it goes back to the civilian side and the political will to be able to exercise that truth. Because as you well know, that's the limitation within the context of the military is we're still under, or the military is still under that civilian control, or should be, and then properly deployed to take on our enemies. So go ahead, sir.
Well, I'm just saying, if they don't protect the American people and they're subjugating their authority,
yes,
and not to do that, to me, that is treason.
Absolutely.
It's against their oath.
Sir, you just spoke my favorite word, an oath, the oath of office. I've taken that oath many times, like yourself, both in military service and also public service. And the meaning of that is always for me is first off, it's something that I say before God. So he is the one that I ultimately answer to, and we do. But we've taken that out of the public sphere to such an extent that those that get elected into office have no clue. But worse are the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats, they take it and they don't care of the words that they say.
They don't. They don't care today, most of them.
Yes.
But that's the whole thing is when you look at the threats as we do a very good analysis. We do a better analysis than the CIA does.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't saying much anymore, by the way. But it's very important that these generals and admirals, by subverting and not doing their duty, are committing treason.
Yes, sir. Yes.
If you really think about it. They're allowing America to fall prey to the enemy.
Yes.
That's enemy and that's sedition.
Yes.
Now, the other thing that we can talk about a little later on that General McInerney and I are working on is the COVID-19, which we know is a biological attack against the United States out of Wuhan.
Yes.
For whatever reason, either it leaked out accidentally, but whatever, they enabled it around the world and it turned into a bio attack against the United States. These are now crimes against humanity. So I want you to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened with COVID-19, people are guilty of destroying humanity, crimes against humanity. Yes. And that's, if you remember the Nuremberg trials and all of that stuff.
Yes.
People are going to be taken to task at some point in time here for their dereliction of duty.
Yes. Yeah. And those are the critical points that I try to bring out, even in the classes that I lecture in, is that to have that understanding and the responsibility of we in self-governance, which a lot of people don't know, that they need to take that responsibility, hold both the elected and more so the bureaucrats, because as we just notated, is that the bureaucrats, they get away with so much. So you have the likes of a Fauci, who's been in NIH forever, and there was no oversight over anything that he was doing. So that was an easy call at the beginning of COVID. I looked at my wife and said, "Oh, this is a bio attack." And she goes, "You would know." And then I looked and I said, so constitutionally speaking, especially when we look at I'm in Ohio now, and we start looking at state constitutions and how they have been amended since the 60s, in particular, when they were looking at what was the fear of nuclear and biological warfare with just the Russians alone, we saw a lot of things that ended up being not just amended within state constitution, but became codified within their revised codes at the state level that allowed these governors to be and act the way that they did. And the legislatures not being smart enough then to call it exactly as you had done, is those are treasonous activities. But at the same time, they argue, well, that's all within the revised code of so and so. But there's that deeper then overshadowing, as you're mentioning too, is that what do we do from that federal constitutional level and call treason enabling our enemy? So within the next 5 minutes, sir, would you
Well, President Trump, we try to encourage President Trump to go to martial law, which would have been that to try people for treason in Congress. Other people were weakening the United States intentionally. And then we had the foreign intervention in our election. So there was a lot of reasons there to protect the people by going to martial law. But as a constitutionalist, I want you to look at what we're trying to do now is the alliance of the free states. We're not calling them red states anymore. Free states, the alliance of the red states are now the alliance of the free states, which means the 10th Amendment.
Yes.
Nullification.
Yes.
The states nullify any federal order which is in violation of the Constitution. And we do that down at the county level all the way to the sheriffs. Under sheriff back in Arizona coming up with the new oath for all the sheriffs that they will stand by the Constitution. And if federal authorities come in to try to arrest anybody, take their weapons, then those people will be placed in handcuffs. Those federal officials will be placed in handcuffs. But we're getting to the serious point now of really following this Constitution versus those that aren't.
Yes, absolutely. And those are some of the actions, as we're even now hearing, where the Biden administration is going to be sending their shot force, as I call it, out into each of the states to take and find out why citizens are not taking and getting the
vaccine.
The vaccine. So we have a lot that's going on, and the same call and the same charge that has to be done to our local county officials in that same manner. What will they do when those, I will call them agents of the federal government, start to show up within our communities? I believe that the action needs to be exactly the same, as where the sheriffs need to be involved in educating then our county commissioners and that to take the types of actions that they need to tell the federal government to go away. And that way we stand our ground in doing what we need to do. So give me another minute perspective on that, because we got 2 minutes left in this segment. And we'll jump back into the discussion of what you are doing and everything that we're around nullification. So just a quick minute on that, please.
Well, we've all had to reflect on what's happened up till now and what we need to do. And again, it's going to come down to the people. We can't depend on our politicians to have the courage to do what they need to do.
Yes.
And abiding by the Constitution and building this country and keeping it strong and not having it be weak by the Communist Democratic Party. Right. And so, like we see at the school board meetings now, women, mothers standing up against the teachings of critical race theory, racism type stuff, and the things that are going down in our grade schools and junior highs and high schools. I mean, it's just horrible. So again, I would just, in ending this segment, say it's we're the people, by the people, of the people. And ladies and gentlemen, we have to do our job. We can't sit back and just assume this is going to go away. This country has changed so much just in this year with the Biden administration that has taken us backwards and taken us to some place where we don't want to go.
Yeah. All I can do is say amen to all of that. I usually give everybody the charge towards the end of the program, but I think it's important to do it right now as well, is to get your butts out of the seats and your feet on the streets, because that's exactly what we need to do. Get involved in those school boards, get involved in that local government. One of the things we'll do is I'll pick up is that with our township commissioners, I've been blessed to have the influence with our township trustees, rather, to be able to move through Second Amendment resolutions. And now we're moving through on some CRT resolutions. And then the next thing that we have to take on is the likes of an organization that we have here in Northeast Ohio is NOACA, which is as you may know, is an old Agenda 21 derivative of how to take over transportation and housing and all of that. So we've got a good group of folks that are working very, very hard. Sam Adams clearly understood all of that, what it meant, and he even told the people, look, you guys signed up now to this new Constitution. You have to live with it, but you have to execute it, and you have to follow what Madison and my cousin John, if you will, had to say about being a virtuous and moral people to do it right.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third and last segment of Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists Got It Right. And I want to just say, hey, all of you folks down there in Lima, Ohio as well, I call them my Screaming Eagles, General. You know, they may not be the 101st, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of great folks that are down there out of Lima with Soaring Eagle Radio. I just love having the opportunity to be on that network as well as Liberty Works Radio Network. So with that, sir, we're going to come on back in that further discussion of what we were saying about becoming locally active, that when we look at nullification, we look at what it means on the 10th Amendment. Also, relative to the 9th Amendment, people don't even have a clue on how we should bring that back and what are our individual rights. One of the things that I talked about in class today is how the 14th Amendment is being misapplied onto our Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, and how then that forces through the federal court system that the Bill of Rights is being applied to the state level, when in fact, as you well know, that was always to put that additional limitations on the federal government. I mean, it's in the preamble to the Bill of Rights, and people never even understand that there's a preamble, let alone read that on the Bill of Rights to give those additional clarifications as to how to limit the federal government. So with that, sir, give us a little bit more on how people can understand what work you're doing now, how they can support that activity, and be able to not just look at it from that national basis, but what's a value proposition that it may have, what your work efforts are within the state and local governments, that the benefits of that effort can help educate the people to action.
Well, thank you for giving me the platform to do that. You know, I look back, I grew up in a small town north of Pittsburgh, very close to the Ohio border. So we all come from the same roots back there.
Right.
And I look, just as an aside, I was the oldest general conducted combat mission. I was 72 when I conducted my last combat mission, taking 400 members of the Free Syrian Army inside Syria to Aleppo. That was in 2012.
Yes.
And they say I'm the oldest general that ever conducted a covert mission at my age. But I'm not bragging again. But it's sort of interesting where I've come from those that small town in Pennsylvania to where I am today, and being involved and readily being involved to stand up for this country and stand up for our rights and stand up for our people. And you can correct me, but I think we have, I don't know how many counties. We have 3,042, or it's over 3,000, maybe 3,242, name like that, counties that we have in America. That's where the strength of America is.
Yes.
And it's not going to be in New York City or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Portland or Seattle. It's going to be throughout America, in the outlying areas, the people standing up, because that's where the government will take advantage of it.
Yes.
Okay?
And that's where they forgot too. If we always heard about the flyover area. Yeah. So those are, when we look at really where the heart and the meat of America are on all of those, especially in the middle section of America, and all the numbers of counties that are there. I mean, we saw that with Trump on how he won all of those flyover areas, and even was able to take and make some really good penetration into areas that were, I I was talking about what's happened with Sharia law and the likes of Michigan, and what we've seen in Dearborn, and then all the way up into Minnesota. And so when we're looking at those types of activities, those infiltrations, I try to tell people I spent about a year on the Energy Security Council as an associate member based on my business background, and just what we were getting always debriefed on and relative that was happening on all of the cross-border activity, and what some of my people were seeing, both from the point on Canada and people not understanding all of the various infiltration that's happened in the up and through the Canadian sector, and that is filtering back and forth across the border. They don't have a clue. Everybody looks south, but nobody's looking north. And we have wide open territories as we look across Alberta and all of that.
The Chinese are buying up agricultural land in Canada. It's unbelievable what they control.
Yes.
And they do it all from money coming out of Shanghai, through Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Ottawa and Ontario.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is basically also buying mineral resource companies that have gone bankrupt in the energy turned, for example, in Calgary and Alberta in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very, very active up there.
Yeah.
They even had in the Winnipeg Institute, like Wuhan, Chinese working in the Winnipeg Institute. They're the ones who went back in November of 2019 back to Wuhan to work. So there's a connection there. And a lot of people don't know it, but Justin Trudeau's father is Fidel Castro.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Did you know that?
Yes, sir. I did.
Yeah. Margaret had an affair with Fidel for several years, so he's a communist, and he's tied into the communist movement, and he hides out in Ottawa. He never goes out, and they have no constitution.
That's right.
Canada.
That's right.
And they say now the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are as corrupt as our FBI and some of our government agencies now. So it's bad up there. But anyhow, that's an aside. But that's all on our website.
Yeah, good.
AmericaUS.org, and make a donation, help us out. We do a lot of great things, and that'll be my only advertisement then.
That's good, because people will be seeing this definitely up on the as we release this on Saturday is when the program will be released. So I'll go in there and put those the website and everything there for you, and that'll be really great. One of the things on the Chinese that I had some conversations with a good friend of mine. He was an Army major, and when he was at the staff college, one of the work efforts that he did was a report on Chinese infiltration into the United States. And this was something that you're probably familiar with back in the 80s timeframe. And the joke that he and I would have is that next time you go to a Chinese restaurant, when you see that tall, really muscular, strapping busboy, just think about really where he is from and what he may be a part of. So we would joke about that because, as you well know, we've got a lot of infiltration here. We saw things. I was doing work with the national labs.
Cities.
Yes.
The system cities thing. That's an approach to get into American cities. That was all devised by the Chinese Communist Party. Confucius centers on our campuses.
That's right. Confucius Institute.
Embedding into high tech in Silicon Valley into all those companies. It was all planned out very precisely. They're very smart.
Yes, and when I was in the telecom sector, I was doing a lot of work with DARPA, and the interesting point about that was doing work with the national labs. And what happened up there in Los Alamos with the Chinese spies and all of that. So there was a lot that was going on within the context of the labs. And as you pointed out, well, within the universities, that we've seen this. It's been there for a lot of years. But as I always say, it's the Hydra. We're lopping off a head here and there, and we're getting these growbacks, and nobody's paying attention to instead of taking and going all the way down on the neck, we're just lopping off the top portions of it, and we're never taking the shield and holding it up so that that ugliness takes and fries itself, as I like to say.
Well, the other thing is Chinese are very smart. They
Yes.
take all of our R&D, research and development, our technology, and then they build their new ships, their new airplanes, their new
That's right.
arms. They're smart. They don't have to take billions of dollars and spend it on research and development. They just take ours. And that's what they've done.
Yes, I
Yeah,
was
we're great.
apoplectic when the Clintons gave them the insight to build reactors as well as to our props on our submarines. So that was an interesting thing that a lot of people didn't pay attention to as well. We have about 5 more minutes to wrap up, General. How about a free-for-all for about 3.5 to 4 of them? Just give us some ideas, thoughts, and how we need to get our butts out of the seats and our feet on the streets. Give us some good counsel and wisdom, sir.
Well, there are things going on in the country to fight what's going on. Flags for America. I want you to Google that or call it up on whatever you on your browser. It's called Flags with the number 4 America. Flags for America. These are 210 general officers and admirals that are standing up and supporting the Constitution and countering what these mischievous, misdirected 4-star admirals and generals are doing today. And that's an important thing to understand what's happening. We do have some influence. We do have some respect throughout the country for what we've done and for what we're doing now, even at our advanced stages. And as one person told me, we need to call back you 4-star, you generals and admirals
That's
that were
right.
trained by the World War II generals, the Eisenhowers, the MacArthur's, the Pattons, because you guys know how to get things done.
That's right.
But,
That's right.
I don't know whether I can get back in my uniform or not. I might have to go to a tailor to get it.
I know I couldn't.
Yeah. So that's going on. We have Major General Joe Arbuckle, who's our head guy on that. He's doing a great job. Flags for America, standupamericaus.org. And then we're also involved in a new entity thrust. It's called the Conservative Economy to counter Amazon and Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
And you can go to conservativeeconomy.com for that.
Very good.
And this is headed up by 3 young West Point officers, by the way. They're
Good.
formed the conservative economy.
Excellent.
So I'm involved in a number of different things. Those are just a few of the things, and some of the plans, like I talked about, for the plan to take down the cartels. But if you go to our website, you'll see everything that we do, and we publish it on there. And by the way, you're free to use any of our studies for whatever purpose you may have.
Well, great. Thank you. Yes.
But we're going to stand strong. We're going to turn this country around. And then you can see how Biden turned it south in just, now 6 months.
Yes.
What can be done to destroy a country, dismantle a country in such a short period of time. But we've got to spend a lot of time in supporting groups like Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. He's on 235 different campuses. He's spreading the word as he can around to our students, and that's where the strength has got to be in making sure that our young understand the Constitution and they understand American history.
Yeah,
very important to understand American history. So
absolutely. Yeah, I do. In my spare time, I also do. We have a program here that's going on in some of the local counties called Liberty Camp, and that's for those ages from 1st grade through 7th grade. And as that character is over my shoulder, Sam Adams, I do reenact him for the kids as part of that. So trying to get that history all the way down into those youth. And then once again, like I've met with Charlie before, and trying to get them into what we're doing into universities is a real challenge. So what it comes down to is, again, being able to get the people to understand all of these truths, to understand our history, to understand our constitutional republic, and those, and I always like to say, I know from a true perspective, Ohio is not a republic, but what I try and encourage people to do is to reinstantiate the republics of their states and understand what federalism is all the way down into that county level. So to do those types of things in general, I want to thank you so much for your time and being on the program. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll tell you what, Sam Adams would be one of those guys that would be delighted to hang with you, participate, and know that you'd be charging right out there with General Washington leading the way and knowing that we would be successful in this nation because, as you said, it wasn't just the Eisenhower crowd of generals that led the way, but I think we take it all the way back to what George Washington did, what he said in his farewell address. And once again, I want everybody to remember to come on back next week.